The symbol of the mountaintop as the home of the divine is as old as human civilization, older than civilization. The Greeks placed their gods on Mount Olympus. Mount Sinai is where Moses received the Ten Commandments. Many cultures built pyramids. Was that an attempt to capture the power of the mountaintop and bring it to the people? Later cultures would build cathedrals, without a doubt an attempt to bring the mountain to the people. To go to the mountaintop is to talk to God. It is the act of connecting, reconnecting with the eternal that is always present. But somehow seems more accessible when we leave behind the distractions of everyday life and let ourselves be one with the natural world. The isolation of a mountain, well, it's just ideal for that. But of course, our mountaintop experiences don't have to be, they don't have to be on a mountaintop. They can be anywhere in time and space. The Buddha's mountaintop experience was at the base of the Bodhi tree, for example. For me, it just so happens that my first mountaintop experience was at the top of a mountain, or damn near. A place called Onion Valley, high in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. I've never successfully described the experience, the moment, because such experiences transcend common language. But occasionally, I come across a poem, a writing, some mystic or another that I recognize as coming out of a similar experience as the one I had, and I say, yes, that's it. But when I show it to someone who has not had a similar experience, they aren't able to see beyond the words on the page. They don't see what I see. They don't feel what I feel. And I'm guessing that at least some people here can relate to that experience of having an experience that you couldn't explain, that you couldn't put into words, and so you had no way to share it. And even if you did, can the other person really relate? I came across the following reading years ago. This is one of those readings that the imagery and ideas continue to resonate with me in my experience. It was originally written by William Bryant Logan in his book Dirt, and describes a well-known mountaintop experience in a certain burning bush. He writes, "The truth, when really perceived and not simply described, is always a wonder. Moses does not see a technicolor fantasy. He sees the bush as it really is. He sees the bush as all bushes actually are. All that is living burns. This is the fundamental fact of nature, and Moses saw it with his two eyes, directly. And that glimpse of the real world, the world as it is known to God, is not a world of isolate things, but of processes in concert." The burning bush. And God tells Moses, "Take off your shoes, because the ground where you are standing is holy ground." He is asking Moses to experience in his own body what the burning bush experiences, a living connection between heaven and earth, the life that stretches out like taffy between Father and Son, our Father the Son, and our Mother the earth. He continues, if you do not believe this, take off your shoes and stand in the grass, or in the sand, or in the dirt. The mountaintop. Regardless of where and when it happens, it's an experience of reality that forces us to see everything differently. Calls us to live life with greater integrity, greater compassion, with greater sense of wonder and awe. Makes us question everything we've been told about this world. Mountaintop experience are not a sign, though, of being chosen or an indication that a person has been set apart for some special purpose. Instead, such experiences are reminders that the eternal is ever present. It's as accessible to anyone and everyone at any time. It's accessible through music or dance, meditation and prayer. It's accessible with the assistance of, certain natural substances, or it can happen without notice or expectation, as was the case of my first experience at the mountain. Coretta Scott King, writing about a mountaintop experience her husband Martin had, she wrote, "For my husband, prayer was a daily source of courage and strength that gave him the ability to carry on even in the darkest hours of our struggle. I remember one very difficult day when he came home bone weary from the stress that came with his leadership of the Montgomery bus boycott. In the middle of that night, he was awakened by a threatening and abusive phone call, one of many he received throughout the movement. On this particular occasion, however, Martin had had enough. After the call, he got up from bed and made himself some coffee. He began to worry about his family and all the burdens that came with our movement. They weighed heavily on his soul. With his head in his hands, Martin bowed over the kitchen table and prayed aloud to God, "Lord, I am taking a stand for what I believe is right. The people are looking to me for leadership, and if I stand before them without strength and courage, they will falter. I am at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I have nothing left. I have come to the point where I can't face it alone." Later, he told me, at that moment, I experienced the presence of the divine as I had never experienced him before. It seemed as though I could hear a voice saying, "Stand up for righteousness, stand up for the truth, and God will be at our side forever." And when Martin stood up from the table, he was imbued with a new sense of confidence, and he was ready to face anything. And he did. I realize that for some of us, what Mrs. King describes may seem like hyperbole, or perhaps it may seem like an irrational response to a desperate situation, or it may even bring into question the mental health of Dr. King. Too often, I think, we hold up his political accomplishments and then downplay his spiritual message. Too often we hold up outstanding individuals like Dr. King, people who have courageously challenged oppression in many forms. We hold them up, place them on a pedestal because it is easier to worship them than to follow their example. We call them saint or Christ or Buddha. We build monuments. We call them Mahatma or prophet. We hold them up, we set them apart. Yet at the heart of their message, is that clarity of purpose and meaning, that which they were able to accomplish, is available to everybody. Their message was that they are not special, not unique, but humble messengers of what is available to everyone. Jesus, for example, never called himself God. He said, I am Ben Adam. I am son of Adam. I am every man. It's a term still used in the Middle East. It means I'm just nobody. I'm just dirt. I'm common. That's what Jesus called himself. His followers called him God. Buddha said, what I did is for everybody. Try it yourself. You can be the next one. Religious movements generally don't just come out of nowhere. Like Dr. King's, there's always oppression of some sort. Could be religious, political, cultural. And all the prophets and saints remind us that the source of our salvation is in our own hands, our own heads, and in our own hearts. Now, Coretta Scott King also wrote that prayer was a wellspring of strength and inspiration during the civil rights movement. Throughout the movement, we prayed for greater human understanding. We prayed for the safety of our compatriots in the freedom struggle. We prayed for victory in our nonviolent protests, for brotherhood and sisterhood among people of all races, for reconciliation and the fulfillment of the beloved community. This was the strength of the Standing Rock movement that is still going on. Because if those in camp, there's prayer going on all the time. The action itself is a prayer. So what all these movements, what all these leaders had in common, and what every social justice movement worth its salt had in common was a language of reverence. They loved their enemy. They had compassion for everyone. They spoke the language of the spirit, the collective unconscious, the deep well of consciousness. They drew on the power of myth and the power of prayer to move people from agreement into action. And they were able to do this because they were grounded not just in the language of reverence, but the practice of reverence. They didn't just talk about it, they did it. Everybody can be great, said Dr. King. Everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and verb agree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love. And how do you have a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love, except through spiritual practice, through having an understanding of grace and love and compassion? The Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt, a Unitarian Universalist minister, she reports that the Kings, in her research, she discovered that the Kings considered becoming Unitarian Universalists at one time. But they realized they could never, in her own words, build a mass movement of black people if they were Unitarian. Personally, I believe the fact that most of our congregations have the racial diversity of, well, Look around. We're not atypical. The fact that we are a predominantly white denomination was only part of the problem, though. I think just as importantly was the fact that Unitarian Universalism, in our emphasis on rational discourse over spiritual development, in our attempt to free ourselves from the prison of superstition, we gave up the innate power of the language of reverence. We severed the umbilical cord that binds us intimately and innately to all life throughout all time. The word religion means to bind, and it comes from that word, that same umbilical cord language. It binds you to the earth, to each other. A language of reverence, a language of transcendence allows us to speak soul to soul. It allows us to transcend the filters of enculturation, the filters of fear and distrust, and so inspire and empower at the very level of the soul. This is the language of faith. Now, Reverend King did not wait for America to go to the mountaintop and see the errors of its ways. Instead, he brought the mountaintop to America and forced us to see the truth of the American apartheid. He used the power of religious thought, religious story, and he brought it to life. Imagine if he just stood up there at every speech and said, well, this is wrong because, people are, generally good, and, all people are equal, and, we should all just be free, right? Or if he gave out some very rational reasoning, well, it's not good for the economy to actually keep people down. And everybody would go, yeah, that's interesting. But it doesn't move people into action like a language of reverence does. In a recent blog post, Connie Goodbread, member of the UUA Southern Region Congregational Life staff, she wrote, "If we keep fighting amongst ourselves, we are doomed. If we cannot get clear on the big picture and stop fighting over the irrelevant and the petty, we are doomed. If we cannot understand that our work is to transform the world, we are doomed. If we cannot understand that we transform the world by being the people we say we are and by working for love and justice, we are doomed. The color we paint the vestibule is not the real work. Fighting over the color of the vestibule is merely work avoidance." From my perspective, from my experience, much of our excruciatingly myopic focus on avoiding religious language is fundamentally the same as fighting over what color to paint the vestibule. And likewise serves to block us from the real work of the beloved community. In the book, A Language of Reverence, featuring essays by several influential UU thinkers, the Reverend William Sinkford, this is back when he was president of the UUA and he was championing this cause. He says, "My growing belief is that as a religious community and as individuals, we may be secure enough, mature enough to find a language of reverence, a language that can acknowledge the presence of the holy in our lives. Perhaps we are ready. Perhaps this faith we love is ready to stop calling itself a movement and call itself a religion." Are we a religion? If not, what are we? What are we? Are we ready? Are we mature enough to stop bickering about the trifles and instead put the energy into what? What can we put our energy into instead of fighting over words? Where shall we put that energy? It's an important question. It's one that I can't answer for you. I can't answer that for this fellowship. These are the questions that this fellowship will begin looking at in today's congregational meeting as you ponder the future of professional ministry here in this fellowship. These are the questions we will be looking at on February 4th in our mission workshop as we consider our values and purposes as a congregation. What is our mission? That's the exact question we're looking at. What are we here to do? Saw this on Facebook yesterday. It seemed extraordinarily appropriate. Shift your focus. Focus on who you want to reach, not who you want to keep. Will you anger some members? Yes, but they will have other churches to go to. The unchurched don't. The underlying question here is this fellowship here for those of us who are already here? Is it here to make us happy and fulfilled? Or is it here for those looking for a place to belong? For those looking to make a difference in the life of others? For those seeking a deeper connection, looking for meaning and purpose? For people who aren't necessarily afraid of religious language, a language of reverence. They're looking for that because it's not out there. It's not at Starbucks. It's not on television. It's not anywhere, and people are starving for it. So is it what we do about them? Or is it all about us? Is it all about you? Is it about just us? Or is it about us? All of us, and them, and all of them. Faith, wrote Dr. King, faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. I pray we have the faith to take the next step in the evolution of this congregation without getting bogged down in too many details about the color of the vestibule. So be it. Amen. Blessed be.